and say, hi, everybody. Welcome to our last class. I don't know how this is the last class of the summer, but it is the last class of the summer. So if you're watching us live, then you guys have till August 2nd to turn in work, which is about a week from now. If you're not watching us live, you still have till August 2nd. It's just less than a week. So tonight we're going to start off with our guest speaker, and then based on what time is left, we're here to kind of answer any extra questions that you have. Um, it's been a great summer, and I feel like we've covered so much, and yet there's so much we didn't get to. So keep an eye out, because Hannah and I are, in theory, developing a follow-up course for this. So keep an eye out for that, because hopefully we'll be able to start offering that in the next year or so. But I've already said multiple times I'm really bad at biographies or bios. I'm going to let our guest speaker introduce himself. In fact, the reason I figured out I was really bad at doing bios is because I messed his up so badly. I found when I was like 6 years old. It's hilarious. But at any rate, so I'm going to let Matt introduce himself to y'all and take it away.
All right. So, hi everybody. How you doing? I actually my name is Matt Fugate. I am provost for Bridges Graduate School of Cognitive Diversity and Education. I often well, let me share my screen because I actually had a slide for this. Not because of you, Sarah. I don't even remember that you messed it up. I'm sure that didn't actually happen, but let me go ahead and share my screen, and we'll start the slideshow here. And first of all, I want to thank you all for being here and taking your time during the summer to be a part of this class. I always love when Sarah invites me to come and speak to this group. One of my greatest joys is getting to talk with educators about topics around twice exceptionality, around culturally responsive teaching. And tonight I get to have that conversation of these two things with you. And so, as I said, I don't stand on formalities. I'm just Matt. I often joke that although I go around and I talk and I write and I research and I do a lot of things around 2E, I'm 1E. I got the ADHD down part solid, missed the gifted boat. This is my second career. I started out in the actually as in the hospitality industry. Before I came into education, I was director of operations for a fine dining restaurant here in Houston. Yes, our graduate school is in LA, but I live in Houston. I go back and forth. When I went into education, I actually got into education because I was the company I worked for was privately owned, and when the owners were retiring, it was always kind of assumed that the chef and I would take over the company. And I was dragging my feet, and I came home one night, and my husband looked at me and we were talking, and he goes, why aren't you more excited about this? And I was like, I don't know. And he looked at me and he just said, you know what? When we met, you said you wanted to be a teacher. Go teach. So I did. I went back to school. Full disclosure, it took me 3 times to get through undergraduate. The third time was the charm. But I think it was because I finally had that clarity And all the stars aligned, the timing was right, and I had that clarity to go in, and now I was going back and really focusing on my passion area. um and so I went back. I got finished my undergraduate degree, and got a job right before graduation at a K-8 school, magnet school here in Houston. I started out, I always say, yeah, on the slide, I have second grade reading language arts. That's ultimately where I ended up, because my first year of teaching, I taught first grade. And I had what I lovingly call the duck and cover class. We were the class that when we would come down the hall, all the other students and teachers would duck and cover. Yep, that was my group, and they were amazing. They were smart, they were brilliant, they were creative, they were everything I loved, and I couldn't let go of them. So when the principal asked me if I would be willing to loop up to second grade and teach reading language arts with that group of students, I immediately said yes. So I taught second grade reading and language arts. I eventually became, uh, it was during that time that I started my master's at the University of Connecticut in educational psychology and gifted education. And then went on to become the K-5 gifted coordinator when the gifted coordinator who came before me left. And then the middle school gifted coordinator retired, and the principal was like, well, can you just take over the program for the entire school? So I jumped at that. We were also a magnet school, so we did not serve, and we were 100% magnet. So our kids came from all over the city, and when the magnet coordinator left to become a principal at another school, my principal came back to me and said, "Well, you're doing a great job with the gifted kids. You want to be the magnet coordinator now?" So I stepped into that role, and I was there until I finally left. While I was at the University of Connecticut, so I was part of their 3 summers master's program, which has an online component as well as attendance in the summer for Comfort. And so it was at my first summer at Comfort, where I met, other than my mother, the 2 women who would have the most influence in my life, though I didn't know it at that time. One was Marcia Gentry, who spent many years trying to convince me that I needed to come to Purdue to get my PhD, and I kept saying no. And finally, one day she called me and she says, "I don't understand. Why do you keep telling me no? I'm telling you, you need to do this." And I said, "Well, Marcia, it snows in Indiana. I live in Houston. I don't do snow." She goes, "Okay, I promise you, 3 snows, I'll get you back to Houston." Because, in Indiana, once it starts snowing, it doesn't stop. And so I did. And so we did a lot of back and forth at my house, but I did my PhD and in gifted and creative and talented studies there with Marcia. That first summer, I also met Susan Baum, uh, who is, and we immediately became fast friends. And so about 2.5 years ago, almost 3 years ago now, she called me, and she had been serving as the provost for Bridges Graduate School. And she called me and she said, "I'm moving up to chancellor. And I want you to come and be the provost. What do you think?" And she goes, um, "Here's an opportunity for you to create the graduate program around twice exceptionality in the way that you would envision it and would always hope it would be." And I said, "Absolutely, 110%." And so I have now in my third year at Bridges Graduate School, and absolutely love every minute of it. I get to work with amazing, talented individuals, and who are passionate about this work, and passionate about working with twice exceptional students and advocating for twice exceptional students. And it's not just the faculty and administration that I work with, but it's the students that we bring in as well. So it's just really been an incredible experience. And I have had the pleasure of knowing Sarah now. I was trying to think about this earlier today. Sarah, I'm not even sure how long now it's been. A long time.
Been about 8 to 10 years because
I
my
was going to
8th
say at
tomorrow.
least 8 to 10 years at this
Mhm.
point. And so, like I said, you all are uh, blessed to have her wisdom and her leadership, her guidance. I send my students. She serves as the chair of our twice exceptional special interest group at NAGC, and she's one of the first stops. I constantly funnel students to her to join the SIG and to get involved. And so I just incredibly happy to be here with you all. And like I said, I spend a lot of time talking about 2E. I spend a lot of time talking about culturally responsive teaching and gifted education in general. And it's great that tonight I get to kind of combine those two things, and it does come up quite a bit. So we're going to start out talking a little bit about implicit bias. I've broken this up into some sections. So we're going to start out with implicit bias and just start to think about what that truly means. So I want to start off with a little poem. Some of you may be familiar with this, because I ain't got a pencil. I woke myself up because we ain't got an alarm clock. Dug in the dirty clothes basket, 'cause ain't nobody washed my uniform. Brushed my hair and teeth in the dark, 'cause the lights ain't on. Even got my baby sister ready, 'cause my mama wasn't home. Got us both to school on time to eat us a good breakfast. Then when I got to class, the teacher fussed, 'cause I ain't got a pencil. Now, I'm going to stop sharing for a minute because I can't see all of you when I'm in this mode. Um, tell me something, tell me about this student. What are some things about this student?
She or he can write awesome poetry.
Awesome poetry. I would agree with that. What else?
It's got a lot of challenges.
A lot of challenges. And I see in the chat a lot of responsibility. Let's see.
They really want to get to school.
Really want to get to school, right? A lot of has had to grow up fast. What other characteristics?
I would say resilient.
Resilient, okay. Anybody see some potential leadership qualities in this student that maybe goes unignored? Or goes ignored, sorry, not unignored. That goes ignored, that gets forgotten, gets lost, intrinsically motivated, organized, right? Okay, so a lot of really important qualities that we see. So we'll go back to this. No, I don't want to share. There we go. And so you all gave me a lot of different answers, from challenges to strengths. And part of the reason for the disparity in the responses that we see, and between students who are identified for gifted services and those who are identified for special education often resides in our own implicit bias. And so implicit bias is defined as a positive or negative mental attitude towards a person, thing, or group that a person holds at an unconscious level. I heard a speaker several years ago give probably one of the most succinct, best definitions of implicit bias I've ever heard. He said to have implicit bias, a person has to meet exactly two categories. They must be living and breathing, and they must have had interactions with other human beings. That's it. That's how implicit bias forms, right? Our brains are continually processing millions of bits of information every day. And so it has to find a way to help lighten that mental load. So we're subconsciously looking for patterns and making associations that helps us process all of this information more efficiently. And the associations that are made by our personal experiences, and in some instances, our lack of experiences, are made through our connections with family and friends, our social, our cultural, our workplace environment, the types of media we consume. It's coming from a lot of different places. And so as a result, we associate groups of people with specific characteristics. And it's from this association that these implicit biases are formed, even if we're unaware of them. So what this often means is that what we think and do can sometimes conflict with what we think we believe. So there are neurological origins to this, right? When we think about our brain and the limbic system, this is a very old part of our brain. It's found in humans, across mammals and animals, and it's very quick, right? It's that quick processing that we do. And part of that limbic system is the amygdala, which is responsible for our emotional responses. It's sometimes referred to as that fight or flight mode that we go to. So when we think back to your teacher education preparation days, your pre-service teacher education days, right? And the discussion about schema, that mental filing cabinet we have, that helps us organize things, helps us make sense around it. Think about a perfect example is our airports, right? No matter where you live, and even if you go to a new airport, wherever you go, you're able to get through that airport and understand you can follow signs, but airports, no matter where they are, they may be different environments. They all have the same basic systems, right? You know how to get off, get off the plane, go to baggage security, baggage claim. You know how to get through security, right? That's your schema at work, right? Your mental filing cabinet. Ask a first grader in sitting in a classroom in the heart of New York City to tell you about horses, and they'll be able to rattle off a bunch of facts. Ask them, have they ever seen a horse or ridden a horse? The answer may be no. How do they know? Because of TV, because of books they've read, right? That's all part of our schema. And so that's all fills into this idea of our implicit bias, because our mental filing cabinet is this unconscious piece that helps us make sense of new things, to help us make those associations when we're faced with a new when we're faced with a new situation. What's the closest thing that I can draw upon, right? And so when we dig into this and think about the impact that implicit bias has in our own work in education, we know researchers have suggested that implicit bias is noticeable in children as early as kindergarten. And when we start to look at within our system of education, we tend to see that there are disparate rates of disciplinary referrals, of suspensions, of expulsions, particularly for young boys of color, students who come from low socioeconomic families, and for our neurodiverse students. Whitford and Emerson did a study a few years ago and suggested that these trends are the results of our implicit bias. And as a result, our students from these marginalized groups are not only at a higher risk of experiencing punitive treatment in school, but placed at a higher risk of detachment from school, of dropping out, and in some cases becoming involved within the criminal justice system. And they've gone on to note that the potential causes for these types of behaviors. First, we know that there is a severe lack of diversity of educators in our school. And when we're talking about diversity in this instance, we're, a lot of times people, when they hear the word diversity, they automatically go to race and ethnicity. When we're talking about diversity, really, though, what we're talking about is this intersectionality of the social identities that exist within a human. I wish I had included this slide. I have a diagram that basically has, the person in the center, and all of these social identities. It's race, it's ethnicity, it's culture, it's socioeconomic status, it's sexual orientation, it's gender identity, it's religion, it's political ideology, all of these various different things. These are what makes up. And so when we're talking about this lack of diversity in our schools, we're talking about all of these intersectionality of these social identities. And so this lack of diversity can result in a disconnect between the lived experiences of the students and those of their teachers and administrators, which can then result in conflicting ideas about classroom norms, which leads to more punitive behaviors and from educators. When we're talking about our 2E students, our neurodiverse students, they are often acting outside the realm of what the system has determined to be normal behavior in class. And so when that happens, I often talk about my little Michael, who's not little anymore. He's a grown man. But in my mind, how we are as teachers. They always stay exactly the same age they were as when they walked out of your classroom for that last time. But my little Michael, who I credit as being my muse, who really put me down this path. I started working with him in kindergarten and continued working with him until I left to go to Purdue. And I had him in my class in second grade, but already in kindergarten and first grade, he had spent just as much time, if not more, in the principal's office than he had in the classroom, because the teachers didn't understand his behaviors. Here was a kid who was extremely gifted, but he was also ADHD, he was dyslexic, he had self-esteem issues. And so it's that discrepancy, it's that disparity in understanding that can lead to these punitive behaviors. There's also just a general lack of understanding of how pervasive implicit bias really is and the role that it plays in our interactions as educators with our diverse gifted students. So as a result, many of us fail to reflect on the on our own microaggressions, and so therefore it goes unexamined. And finally, all too often, educators tend to base discipline problems on factors outside of the school, right? It can't possibly be anything we're doing or anything the school doing. It's because of the socioeconomic status of the family. It's the neighborhood they live in. It's their family structure, right? It goes on and on. And so this focus on these and other environmental factors somehow serves in our minds as an absolution of any responsibility. What we have to understand is behaviors are never the problem. They're the symptom of a problem, right? Or they're the symptom of something else. And so I wanted us to start out with just this understanding of implicit bias so that as we move forward throughout the evening, we can kind of take stock of our own understanding and our own interaction when we're working with these neurodiverse students. I want to talk a little bit. There's been a rise in recent years within the neurodiversity movement. And so I wanted to spend a little time talking about this. According to the American Association of American Colleges and Universities, we have to think about culture, right? What is culture? And so the AACU defines culture as all knowledge and values shared by a group. Additionally, the American Psychological Association has defined culture in very broad terms to include race and ethnicity, gender, sexual orientation, immigrant status, ability and disability, and any other salient aspects of social being. So again, it's that intersectionality of the social identities that creates these cultural groups. And so by these definitions, neurodiversity is indeed a culture. And as such, it's really important that those of us within education shift the paradigm from this medical model, the fix-it model that we have operated under for far too many years, to the social model that really understands that these students bring their own unique sets of strengths to the learning environment. When we think about this question, what if autism, ADHD, and other learning differences were understood as natural variations within humans rather than disorder? This has really been the core message of the neurodiversity movement from the beginning. Within this movement, there has been a reframing of understanding that these students can bring benefits to our society as a whole, rather than as people who have conditions that have to be cured, right? Just as our understanding of biodiversity, neurodiversity provides a richness to society. This is the neurodiversity movement was originally started within the autistic community, but it's really grown to include the breadth of the neurodiversity community, including those who identify as ADHD, dyslexic, learning different, I hate the word disabled, and other characteristics of neurodiversity. And so from this cultural perspective, neurodivergence can be an important part of how individuals view themselves. Additionally, just as in other cultures, the neurodiverse community includes preferred modes of expression and communication, as well as its own art and literature. And so we think about the way, you know, there's been the out of the neurodiversity movement has this debate around identity first versus person first language, right? When the APA 7th edition came out, there was a strong move towards person first language. So it wasn't that you had ADHD, you were a person with ADHD. Well, the neurodiversity movement has come around and said, wait a minute, some of us prefer identity first, being, you know, and again, this grew out of the autistic community. And I have several people that I know who are like, I don't want to be a person with autism. I am an autistic person, right? And so we see examples of this when we look back at along the line of history of all the incredible minds that have come along through art and literature who were or are neurodiverse themselves. Temple Grandin, Richard Branson. We've got the pervasives within the technology field, Steve Jobs. And with this pervasiveness of personal technology, that has afforded those who may be less comfortable in face-to-face settings to have a more relaxed and less anxiety-provoking way to communicate with others. And finally, the neurodiversity perspective represents an alternative to our current special education or medical model way of understanding how human brains differ. And so from this perspective, autism, ADHD, other learning differences, and ways of being are natural, valuable, and linked, but are also linked with real challenges that deserve attention. Several years ago, I coined the term attention divergent hyperactive giftedness. When I first started out, my focus was, and still my primary focus is our gifted students who are ADHD. And that's how that term grew, attention divergent hyperactive gifted, ADHD, because I didn't want the focus to be on disorder and disability, right? These kids are not learning deficient, they're learning different. They learn differently. And that doesn't take away from the fact that there are real challenges. I have a dear friend who she and I have had this discussion many times. You know, one of the great things about academia is you get to have these great debates over glasses of wine, and then you know, at the end of the night, you hug and you walk away. If only our politicians could figure out this formula. You know, her argument with me has been, I feel like you're taking the attention away from the challenges that exist. I'm like, look, I live those challenges every day. I get it. But if we don't start shifting the paradigm, if we don't start shifting the way we're looking at these students and what they bring to the learning experience, then we're doing a real disservice to them. Because again, it's not about this medical model of fixing them. It's about a social model of how do we highlight and bring forth their strengths. And that's part of then bringing this conversation of cultural responsiveness. And so I want to now move into creating, how do we start to create a culturally responsive environment for our 2E students in the classroom? In our work at Bridges, we have found that successful programs that meet the needs of our twice exceptional students that are those that really include these 5 important pillars. First, that we have to create a psychologically safe environment in which these students feel a sense of belongingness that acknowledges and addresses their challenges and their strengths and builds their self-esteem, right? That's basic, right? We're going back to Maslow's hierarchy of needs right here, right? That need for belongingness, of feeling that sense of being, of safety, of knowing that here's someone that really sees me. There also has to be a tolerance for the asynchrony that exists for our 2E students. We know that all gifted students can experience asynchrony in their development, intellectually, physically, and social emotionally, particularly at a younger age, right? For our neurotypical gifted students, though that asynchrony tends to balance out over time as they get older. But for our twice exceptional students, this asynchrony can continue into adolescence and even into adulthood. So as those of us in the education field, counselors, psychologists, teachers, administrators, we need to understand that these discrepancies are even greater for these students than their gifted peers because they struggle with the asynchrony of their intellect and how they are able to express or use that knowledge. Singer referred to this as asynchrony squared. And it can make our twice exceptional students feel even more vulnerable within an education setting if there's not that understanding of what they're going through. The other thing that we really need to understand is that these students need time. They need time to process. They need time to think. They need time to take a break when things become too much for them. When I was before I went to Bridges, I was at the University of Houston downtown. I worked with pre-service teachers, and I always had them. One of the assignments I taught the educational psychology survey course. So if we all sat through some version of that course. It's the one where each week the topic could be a whole class in itself, but we're going to cover as much of it as we can in 1 week's time and move on to the next subject. But when we would talk about social emotional development, I would have them work together in pairs to design a classroom. A very typical activity for pre-service in a pre-service teacher class. But what I told them was they had to, when they were talking and showing the classroom design that they had come up with, they had to draw it out. They had to justify their design, not from a practical utilitarian standpoint, but from a purely social emotional standpoint, right? And one of the things I would say, and I intentionally worded the question this way, I said, and one thing that you have to consider is, are you going to put in a timeout space? You can, or you can choose to include a timeout space, or you can choose to not, but you have to, that's the one thing, one question everybody has to answer. If you included it, why? If you didn't, why not? And I did that on purpose, because the majority of the students would not include a timeout space. And and I would always bring it back in the discussion when we would come back together. I would say, why do you think I asked this question? If we don't create some space for these kids to go when it becomes too stressful, they're going to find that space, right? In my classroom, I had this one of these little love seat papasan chairs. I don't know if some of you are in my age, back in the 70s, and very popular back in the 70s and 80s, these, bamboo and rattan big circle chairs, and they also came in a couch love seat style oval, and I had one of those in my library area, and that was the space where kids would be like, when it got too much, when they needed to take a break, they would go to that space. That wasn't my intention. I had not, as a first year teacher, included a timeout space in my thinking, but the kids found that space. That was their safe space, their happy space, where they could go, and then when they were ready, they could come back and rejoin the group. And so we've got to figure out that. um you know we also have to understand that for these students, sometimes what can appear to us as procrastination is really a need for incubation. I experienced this in my own work. Some of you were coming in when I was talking to Sarah. I have a forward for a book that we're both contributing to for colleagues and friends. It's due August 1st, and there is a little bit of procrastination, circumstances, mother nature got in the way a little bit here for us here in Houston. But that incubation has been good. I really find that when some of the tasks I'm doing, like for me, especially writing, can be challenging, that mental load, I need that time to really incubate on what it is I'm going to write. And so even though I may not physically be working on the task in the moment, I'm constantly processing and thinking and planning. And so we've got to provide them with that time to incubate. We have to think bigger than the extended time that we're talking about in IEP recommendations, right? Accommodations a lot. Time and a half. Well, if you give me time and a half, I'm going to take time and a half, right? And then probably want more. What we need when we're talking about that gift of time, what we're really talking about is building that opportunity for them to process, to incubate, to be able to plan out. And finally, we really need to begin to approach learning from a strength-based, talent-focused lens. And so this requires us to focus on learning strategies that put the center on the student's strengths and their interests, while differentiating and dual differentiating our curriculum to move students forward to appropriate levels of depth and complexity. And so again, this means that we have to recognize that these students are gifted first, and they deserve learning opportunities that really develop their intellectual talents and interests, while also providing them with the types of supports they need in their areas of challenge so that they can fully demonstrate those talents and those interests. And so by putting their strengths at the forefront, these twice exceptional students are able to build on the inner resources that they already have, which puts them in a much better position to work in their areas of difficulty. So putting all of this as simply and succinctly as possible, they grow in one area. If we help them grow in one area, then other areas are able to follow. And I've talked a lot, so, and I can't see you all. Any questions, comments, thoughts before we move on and talk about environments a little bit?
We definitely have had quite a chat going in here.
Okay, any questions in there going?
Looking real quick.
This is always the challenge when I'm sharing my screen. I can't see everybody. So I forgot to mention, I did mention my own ADHD. If something comes up, just unmute and speak up. I love that.
So Matt, my only question for you, I'm looking through here, a lot of it was some just commentary when we were talking about the identity, because we do have several folks in here who shared their own disabilities and how they prefer to have their identity shared. We do usually take a break around 8 o'clock. I don't know if you want to get into your next thing and then break after, or if you want to do a break now.
Let me see. If we can get through this conversation on the 5 environments, then that'll be a great place for us to stop before we talk about personalities.
Sounds
Does
great.
that work for everybody?
Sounds good for us, I think.
Yes. I just,
Okay.
I wanted to share something if I may.
Yeah.
I loved how you were really stressing on the autistic kids, that that's their identity. And I just love it. And that's who they are. And then with that are the characteristics, that flow with it, and it needs to be recognized.
Yeah.
And
Exactly.
my oldest has characteristics of Asperger's, and oh, he's just doing famously. He's a Marine, and he's married with a baby. But when he was in middle school, there were these kids that just embraced him. This really great group of kids, and the mothers knew, but the kids didn't. And the one kid came home and said to the mother, Andrew, they all like to hug each other. And he was like, Andrew doesn't like us to hug him. And, and they noticed that there was something different about him. And, the parents just said, that is who Andrew is. Not everybody is touchy-feely. And so I love that you pointed that out, that is, they have their own identity, and that's what it is. And you can't take that away, and you have to recognize that. And, both the good and the bad, and so I just wanted to thank you for that. That really resonated with me.
Wonderful. And thank you for sharing that, Kathy. I appreciate that. Okay. So before we take a break, I just want to talk a little bit about learning environments and the dimensions of our learning environment, with the understanding that these 5 environments these all exist within the overall environment of our classroom. So it's not that we're creating just one environment, but we have to be aware of all of these environments, and that we're providing all of these environments that help support our 2E students. And the first one is the intellectual environment. And this is the setting in which we're engaging in critical thinking and reflection, in inquiry. And it's characterized by this atmosphere of open-mindedness, creativity, and intellectual stimulation, and is really supportive of the exploration of new ideas and perspectives. And so it's within this environment that those interactions between curious and engaged learners is really encouraged and supported. Learners are encouraged to ask questions, to seek answers, and really engage in a critical analysis and debate. They feel again that sense of belongingness, so they're able to express their thoughts and ideas freely without fear of judgment, and are really surrounded by others who are just as engaged as they are in the pursuit of knowledge and intellectual growth. Within the intellectual environment, we're fostering personal growth, creativity, and the development of critical thinking skills. And this is really essential for the advancement of knowledge and the development of new solutions when they're presented with complex problems. And it also helps to, again, to foster that sense of community, because they come together as individuals with this shared passion for this intellectual exploration, to be able to come together to learn and grow. So within this is where we talk about differentiation of the curriculum, differentiation of product type or content focus, so that we're addressing the 2E strengths, the 2E students' strengths, their interests. This is really essential. Twice exceptional students benefit from having choices in how they're demonstrating their knowledge and understanding. So we need to allow them the choice to demonstrate their ideas through alternative ways, whether it be videos, Minecraft, art, song, poetry, simulations, role-playing activities, hands-on activities, problem-based learning, integration of the arts are all ways to appeal to the 2E students' intellectual side. It's really important for these kids to eliminate rote learning or repetitive work as much as possible. And so this includes eliminating or modifying common requirements that we have around handwriting or traditional quizzes and tests or class participation, finding alternative ways for them to interact, by reducing the volume of work. Why give a student 50 math problems if they can express and show their understanding in 10? Why do we have it's important to also mix up opportunities for independent and small group work. We need to use visual aids like charts and graphs. These are also very helpful. This is when we talk about dual differentiation should really be invisible differentiation, right? Invisible accommodations. And so when we start to do this, we're accommodating the needs of these students, but it's not that typical checklist that we find on an IEP form. The next environment that we have to think about and include in our classrooms is the social environment. when we're asking these students to navigate the social interactions, this can, Kathy, that was a great example that you provided. This can be really challenging for our twice exceptional learners. And oftentimes they can experience social isolation due to their differences in how they interact socially. Their advanced cognitive abilities can sometimes lead to a sense of social disconnect, as their peers may not share their interests, may not share their ways of learning, may not share their ways of communicating. And so that, that can happen to our gifted students. Now let's add that neurodivergent layer to it, and that can further exacerbate those feelings of isolation and create a difficulty in forming those meaningful connections. We talked about asynchrony of development. Part of that asynchrony of development means that their social skills may not align with those with their peers, and or even may align with their intellectual abilities, right? And it's this mismatch that can create challenges in navigating these social situations, both in and outside of the classroom. Our 2E students often grapple with perfectionism. They're driven by the desire to meet their own high standards or the expectations of others because they're gifted. And so they can develop a fear of failure combined with a pressure to excel academically, and this can contribute to heightened anxiety. And this anxiety then can extend to their social interactions and within and into social settings, where the fear of not meeting the expectations of others can further impact their ability to engage with their classmates and with their teachers. So by creating a supportive social environment for these gifted and twice exceptional students, we can begin to provide them with opportunities to be with intellectually like peers, utilize talent-based flexible grouping strategies that really capitalize on their strengths and help to establish this positive image with their peers and build their self-esteem. Pairing twice exceptional students with mentors, right? Community-based mentors can often offer valuable social support. And these can be educators, it could be older students, it could be, like I said, community members who from outside the learning environment who share similar interests. It could even be peer buddies, and our peer buddies can provide a more immediate and relatable support source of support for them within their learning environment. And so these relationships really then can serve as a bridge for social connections and offering them some guidance and companionship as well. The creative learning environment is really one that encourages our twice exceptional students to learn through trial and error, to use their imagination, and to really think critically to solve problems. By leveraging these learned skills, such as goal setting, ways to share their knowledge, and how to build relationships, a creative learning environment can help students practice and develop their own theories, their own ideas, and really set them in motion. Helping them develop their creative capacities can have both direct and indirect benefits. So rather than feeling penalized or embarrassed for taking a chance, students with within a strong creative environment feel comfortable trying new things and understand that if they're making a mistake within this creative learning environment, it's not seen as a negative, it's seen as a learning experience. As well, that didn't work. Let's try and figure it out and try something new. And so when they're encouraged to pursue this type of creativity and come up with these creative solutions to problems, they learn that persistence within that process of continually trying a new approach to solving that problem. They also become better at working as a team, and solving complex problems and finding new ways to learn. This is within this environment, they can begin to grapple with real world problems that are relevant to their lives and have no predetermined solution. When we think about, we've become so focused in education on teaching to the test, but we know as adults, if we go to our administrator, our principal, our superintendent, whoever it is, and say, I have a problem, they're not going to hand us a Scantron and say, choose A, B, C, or D, right? But that's what we're doing to these kids. And so we need to encourage them to begin to make connections between what may seem like unrelated topics and ideas, because they're given time to be creative and to solve problems in a way in which the fear of making a mistake is taken out of the equation, and is truly seen as a learning opportunity. The fourth environment is that emotional environment. And we know that emotions impact learning, attention, and our relationships. And in the classroom, which is, again, in itself, its own social community, a 2E student's perception of safety to share their feelings and thoughts is vital. Especially alongside those peers who may not be synchronous with the intensity of their emotions or with their response patterns to their own emotions or those of others. And so a supportive emotional environment is one in which they feel safe for emotional expression and development, and fosters positive relationships and self-advocacy skills through a variety of ways. That can be through role play, it can be through modeling. The students are able to take healthy risks without fear of judgment or without fear of failing, of making a low grade. Again, for students in this type of supporting emotional environment, failure is a learning opportunity. They're given a chance to practice productive failure. And so this is a really a class culture that is responsive to student feedback and asks all students to share concerns so that our twice exceptional students can see that they're not the only ones who may be challenged within a particular situation or within the school setting again. And so again, this goes back to this idea of when we create this supportive emotional environment, and we're asking that feedback from all our students, that's that, invisible accommodation. Some 2E students can, again, we talked about high anxiety that can exist for our 2E students, and this can really interfere with their success within school. And so within this positive emotional environment, developing this helps us plan for those predictive stressors, whether it be exams or transitions between classes. we need to listen to and validate students' concerns and teach them self-awareness and coping skills, like deep, slow breathing. Let them practice meditation, chair yoga, other types of relaxation strategy. You know, if you have a twice exceptional student who's come into your school, who's new to your school, give them that time to walk through, meet with the teachers, meet with other students, meet with administrators, give them that time to ask questions and discuss concerns in advance to the beginning of of being new in that school. And this speaks to the question that came up before we started in the chat for parents, right? This is a great thing for the parent of a 2E student. If you're putting them in a new environment, talk about that. Talk about what that's like. Give them that opportunity to meet with people and become comfortable and ask their own questions within that learning environment so that they can begin to feel like they belong in that space. Finally, we have to consider how the spaces within the physical environment meets the needs of our twice exceptional students. And this includes spaces that allow them to get up and pace and move around without distracting others if they need to. We need to provide alternative seating choices or even places for students to stand up and work. I will never forget, I had my little Anthony, again, not little, grown man now, but I remember it was the meet the teacher night, right? The Thursday before the start of school, you bring in school supplies, and at our school, class list, that was the big reveal of the class list. They didn't, because my principal wanted to cut down on requests to change classrooms, right? So she wouldn't post the class lists until this meet the teacher night. And I'll never forget Anthony's mom coming up to me and she said, "Oh my gosh, Matt, I was so glad when I saw Anthony was in your classroom. Please, if you teach him one thing, please teach him how to sit down in his seat." I was like, "Well, there's Miss Lazenby." That was our principal. "You need to go ask her for a classroom change because I don't care if he can sit in his seat." Right? Anthony was the type of kid who needed to bounce, right? Sitting down. He was the typical 2E students. I had been working with him since kindergarten. He needed to bounce to think, right? He was the one who was sitting up, arms on the tables and constantly bouncing. But you know what was happening when he was bouncing? He was being productive, right? These students need those opportunities for brain breaks or to be able to think in the way they need to, which can be provided in a positive physical environment. And finally, we need to consider the sensory needs that may exist for some of our twice exceptional students. And so this includes sensitivities to light, to sound, to smell. Ultimately, within this 2E friendly and these 5 2E friendly environments, we're providing them choice and control. We're enabling them to learn in ways that best suit their needs and preferences. And we're understanding that these spaces need to be continually flexible and adaptable and allow students to customize their learning environments, even if it's only during a specific task and not for the full day. And so this is a good place for us to stop and take a break. And we can then come back if there's any questions or comments. I'm going to hang around, but take it away.
Excellent. So I'm going to go ahead and hit pause on the recording. But we are
Yep.
back on record.
All
Hi,
right.
I have a quick question. So you were talking about social isolation among some 2E students, and I had a challenging situation last year with a student who I believe now, based on what I've learned in this course, it's probably 2E. And I did observe there was challenges with working in groups and with friendships. And I think this created a lot of anxiety for the student, which I think resulted in a lot of absences. Now, he still did really well because he's extremely bright, but you know, there was a lot of loss there in terms of class time. One of the challenges, and I did talk to the student, and he expressed to me that that he does talk to the other kids in class, but they don't understand him. And you know, the challenge is that his interests were so different than what like a typical middle school 8th grade student wants to talk about. He was very interested in politics and particularly in communism. And he knew more about it than probably anyone I've ever met, and would talk about it and read about it and just, you know, it was kind of the thing where like, you know, he would just bring it up almost as like a joke in some way. And the kids, it just went right over their heads. And so, I just don't know, you know, I felt he's just a lovely, lovely child. And I just felt so bad for him because I did feel like he was really socially isolated in the classroom, even with like the forced, like, you know, groups that I made and things like that. A lot of times it was a workhorse. A lot of times the kids would, you know, chime in a little bit, but then he would end up doing like, you know, all of the slides and spend like most of the time. And I could see like, because I know what he does and what they do. So I know who's doing the work, and the language that's being used. So I was just, I was really baffled. I just didn't know how to help him, you know, and he's off to high school now. So I just hope the situation gets better for him. But I just think it was really hard. And I just don't know how I could have helped him. I'd like to hear your thoughts about that.
So, I had one of my former second grader, was an expert in World War II. He had grown up hearing stories from his grandfather about the war. And so it, you know, and he was I learned things from him. And so I gave him opportunities to bring that in, you know, special opportunities, it created opportunities within the learning environment again. So we would have you know, like a interest gala. And so students we would talk about their interests, you know, they have an opportunity and then bring in artifacts or things they had created or posters they had created, and almost like at, you know, if you go to a conference, the poster presentation sessions where you can tour around and see different things, so that people could tour around, so that they could learn from that student. Also thinking about not just interests, but ways they learn. And this is going to get a little bit into the personality prototypes that we're about to talk about. And thinking about when you're doing those groupings, those flexible groupings, what are those unique, not just interests, but talents, strengths that the student brings. So within that, I would imagine he had strong research skills. So when you're creating, when a lot of times when we think about creating small groups, we think about it either in terms, oftentimes we'll think about it in terms of achievement groups, or sometimes it's just, you know, you'll be in the classroom and it's really just the scatter shot of just randomly putting students together. But if we start to think about how can we be intentional about creating small groups of when we're doing small group work, opportunities for students to say, okay, this student has a strength in writing, so their job within the group is to be the scribe. This student has strengths in research, so they're the ones who are going to dive in and do the research. And giving very specific jobs and purposes to each student within that group lets them highlight their strengths, and then they're each contributing equally to the final product. And that again helps then the students within the group start to understand and see each other's strength areas and learn more about each other. And then again, provides that additional opportunity. There's no magic pill. It all takes time. But that's part of making sure that we're thinking very purposefully about all 5 of these dimensions within the learning environment: the intellectual, the social, the creative, the emotional, and the physical environment, and how we're creating that within the culture of our classroom. I hope that helps a little bit.
It does. Thank you. I appreciate it.
Yeah, no problem. And like I said, we're going to talk a little bit about personality prototypes and we again in the work with part of one of the pieces that we use at that we teach students, our graduate students, but also at Bridges Graduate School, but within Bridges Academy, which is the 2E school for our 2E school for students in 4th through 12th grade, is we talk a lot about we use the suite of tools as an assessment to build a strength-based education plan. And one of the pieces of that is what we call the quick personality indicator. And it's to help identify within the students their various personality types. And I want to say that at the very beginning, every individual, every person has all 4 of these personality types within them. That no one person is only one personality type. It's rather that all of these personalities exist within all of us, but to varying degrees, with one or more of these personality types being predominant from the others. So for example, in my own, we have an adult version of the QPI. We don't have time tonight. I was going to have you all take it, but we have an adult version of this QPI that we take, and I'm primarily a people person and a creative problem solver, but I also have strong elements of a learned expert, and to a much lesser degree than the other personality types, my practical manager side. And so I want us to take a moment to go through these different personality types, their characteristics, and the types of learning that are available. But just keep in mind that as you're thinking about this, it's not that any one student is just the practical manager or just the learned expert, but that all of these personality types exist, and there are times when we have to dig deep in and bring out these various skills, but predominant types do exist. And so our first personality type is the practical manager. This is the one who is the concrete sequential thinker, the timekeeper. They like to organize things. They want everything's got to flow just on time. If the schedule gets off, it's disruptive to them. The students who are predominantly this type, we tend to see higher levels of perfectionism, higher levels of procrastination when they're faced with particularly challenging situations, especially if it's outside their interest area, if it's outside their talent area, if it's something that is more in line with their neurodiverse prototype. So for instance, if for me, the practical manager side, I will procrastinate on something if I know I have to figure out a very tight system. And so that's not incubation at that point. That's just outright procrastination for me. They can be very rigid. Again, don't like change. And can easily become overwhelmed by a lot of outside factors and influences. The types of activities that practical managers like, first of all, has to be very practical. They like to show what they know based on facts and on very specific concepts. When we're giving them directions for an activity, it needs to be very specific, step by step. The way they like to show their learning is through charts, through graphs, through diagrams, any way that, again, they're presenting the facts in front of them. And so I'm going to use a unit of study throughout these 4 personality types to kind of show the types of performance tasks you might want to give, and thinking about differentiation, how you could differentiate the same idea, the same unit, the same plan piece of assignment for students, but in different ways that meet their personality types. So if you're doing a unit on plants and structures, for the practical manager, their performance task might be to make and present a 3D model of a plant cell to show their understanding of the cell structure and the use of the cell's parts, right? So these would be the directions. First, you're going to design a 3-dimensional model of a plant cell following the diagram on your desk. Very specific. Next, you're going, all of the materials that you're going to need will be on the red table in the middle of the class. And you can choose the materials that you need from that table. Then you're going to work at your desk and you need to finish making the project before the end of the day, right? Very specific, step by step. This is how we work well with our practical managers. For them, it's been a good day when at school, when there have been absolutely no surprises. Everything went just as scheduled. There were no pop-up assemblies or disruptions to the day. Fire drills will throw these practical managers way off. When they were learning, they had those directions. They were given to them in a handout and they had all of the important information they need. When they get home, they're these are the kids, they need to get anything, whether it's work or chores, they need to get it done before they can have any downtime. These are the ones that like to plan. In my household, my husband is the practical manager, right? His QPI, his quick personality indicator is exactly the inverse of mine. So for these kids, life, it needs to be predictable and follow a schedule, right? Rob and I have had over the years had to learn how to negotiate and navigate vacations, because he'll want to plan out every minute of every day, and I'm like, let's just walk off the plane and see what adventures we can get into, right? Very different styles of working. And I apologize, I know we've got about 10 minutes and I want to get through this pretty quickly. Keys to negotiating with these students, to interacting with them. You need to be objective. You need to be very practical. Tone of voice needs to be very steady, very calm, almost very monotone, right? You can't let emotion get into the conversation. If they're solving a problem, you need to give them the opportunity to plan it out, carry out like a pilot study so they can see what it is, evaluate the results, and then they can go back and make adjustments. Their workspaces, here we see Bill Gates, very much a practical manager. For them, they need a quiet place to be able to work that's away from excessive noise, excessive distractions. They need a very clean, organized workspace where that's where they think and produce best. For the learned experts, these are our thinkers, right? Much like the practical manager, very much sequential thinkers, but they're more abstract sequential versus concrete sequential. These types of 2E learners tend to be very avid readers. They love to read. They love to argue and debate. When they are reading, it tends to be nonfiction, information they find interesting, and technology is very important to this type of personality type. Their technology is their preferred way of learning and gaining information. For these kids, again, they're very theoretical but abstract. We need to make sure we're giving them opportunities to explore a variety of resources and be able to delve into a variety of opinions of experts. These are not the kids who are going to go on and find a blog posting. They want to hear it from the experts in what it is they're studying. We need them give them time to allow them to think and synthesize and then communicate their opinions. They like tasks that in which they can write editorials where they're able again to participate in debates, to conduct research and report those results. Giving them times there, again, that abstract sequential thinking. So giving them opportunities to create documentaries or write informational texts or even to develop political type cartoons. Going back to our plans and structures, we might ask them to write an educational article that's going to be posted on the class website that will help others understand what they've learned about the transfer of light into plant energy in class and through further research. Your article does not have to only be words, but can show information using video links and images. So again, allowing them to bring that technology piece in. So their directions are going to look very different, right? To do this assignment, you first must do some research. You need to find at least 3 additional pieces of information about photosynthesis that you did not learn in class, but find interesting and think that your classmates should know. Again, giving them that opportunity to delve in and research beyond just what was happening in the web class, in the classroom. Visit the websites provided or search the internet for information that you can understand and can put into your own words to inform your classmates. And then the final piece is to prepare the article you would like to write so it can be shown on the website, reminding them to proofread and edit before they upload it and include those images and links to the video resources that they will use. For these students, it's a good day when they've had a great debate on an issue in class with friends or with their teachers. In learning, they've had time to read or surf the internet for new information, watch the news. They love to watch the news or the History Channel and really engage in mental challenges. At home, they like to spend time solving puzzles and playing on their computer games, but strategy games. And they love to argue, debate, and discuss. So knowing this, understanding that when the keys to negotiation for this group is making sure to present our arguments from a very logical standpoint, and that it's based, that we're backing up every statement we make with research, whether it's formal or informal, because these are debaters, helping them understand the rules of debate. You know, you're going to talk for 3 minutes. At the end of 3 minutes, then the other person is going to talk, and I, as the teacher, I'm going to be here to moderate this. But then also giving them opportunities to serve as mediators within the class space. Here we see Al Gore's workspace, very much a learned expert. These are the students who do well working at a table in a library with their books spread about. Making sure they have access to the internet where they can really begin to delve into their intellectual curiosity when they're studying about a topic, really also helps to enhance their learning. These are the kids, again, this is much what my husband's office looks like. These are the ones that it may look like disarray, but you ask them where it is and they go straight to the pile and pull up the stack and pull out exactly what you've asked for, right? They know where everything is. For them, it's in order. It may look like chaos to us, but for them, it's in order. The third personality type is the creative problem solver. These are our risk takers, our inventors. They love tinkering. They like to take academic risks in their area, particularly in their area of interest. They tend to be our adventurous students. And they love getting involved with challenges and being creatively productive, and love participating in competition. For them, the types of activities that they like are very open-ended, where they have a lot of choices, and they're provided opportunities to where again they're not only do they have a lot of opportunity, a lot of choices, but they're allowed to really create their own path for learning. They don't want a lot of guidelines or restrictions. The fewer the guidelines and restrictions, the better. They enjoy being able to think of new ways to solve problems. They perform, and they tend to have our humorous side. Sometimes that can present as being the class clown. Multimedia projects are really important for this group. So for our going back to our unit, choose one of the following activities to show your understanding of photosynthesis. So here are the directions. Choose one. Use iMovie to explain how plants get their energy. Create a 3D model using recyclable materials in the classroom to show different stages of plant growth. Design a board game that helps others understand photosynthesis, but making sure the game is ready to market. So make sure your board looks nice, that your pieces look nice, that you've got the directions and all the pieces that people will need. Or they can create a flip book to visually show the process of plant growth. So again, you see the directions are very different. It's a choice menu for these kids. For them, it's a good day when when school was fun, right? They had lots of choices, they had lots of opportunities, they got to be creative. When they get home, they really have no plans. They like to leave the door open. And they get to do it my way. And these are the kids that don't ask for permission, just ask for forgiveness, right? They don't take no for an answer. For these kids, keys to negotiation again, choice, allowing them to come up with creative solutions to solve problems, giving them general guidelines, but nothing very specific or with a lot of detail. They want to come up with the details. Here we see Steve Jobs, very much a creative producer. This is the workspace. They need space where they can spread out, where they can move. You know, thinking may happen in any position. It could be lying on the floor, it could be hanging out in a beanbag chair. Laptop, this is why laptops, tablets, these are great for these kids. These were really made for these kids because they need that ability to be constantly on the move. That's how they think. The last characteristic, and I promise Sarah I'm gonna be done, is the people person. These are our sensitive,
And
emotional
Kamala beat
students.
Trump.
I'm sorry.
I think it was a accidental unmute.
Oh, they're the ambassadors, the sensitive kids. Their characteristics, they can be very dramatic, artistic in a lot of different ways. These tend to be very good leaders because they have that ability to connect with others and show a genuine care and understanding about the needs of others. For them, their activities that they like, anything that allows them to show their creative side, that integrates arts. It needs to be personally relevant to them. If they can't relate to it personally, then it's not going to work. It's not going to hold their attention. These are the kids that really like to be able to work with small groups or at least have another partner around. And we, you know, when we're thinking about products, these are the kids that we want to give them time to write poetry, to express their dramatic side. Creative writing, blogging, journaling are all important. For these kids, the performance task are the directions. This is it. There's no other slide for directions for this group. The performance task. In a small group, create a personification of the process of photosynthesis, add music and dance to enhance the meaning. That's it. That it's fully about what can you create? How can you bring your knowledge and understanding of plants and structures and photosynthesis and present it in a new and creative and dramatic and artful way? For these kids, it's a good day when everyone agreed and was friendly. They had time to hang out their friends. And when someone told them that they were special and they did a good job, it's that simple. For these kids, they're negotiating. They don't respond well to hostile language, to accusations. So making sure, because they need that assurance to love and be loved and respected, despite whatever the conflict may be. And sometimes they understand that the resolution is we're going to agree to disagree, but we're going to walk away as friends, right? For them, their workspace is they need to be able to be close to their peers, their friends, their family. They tend to get lonely if they're going to be sent away to a quiet, isolated space. They need to know what's going on around them. It's the not knowing. It's not being around activity and noise and other things that becomes the distraction for these students. So it's important then that you schedule time and organize homework, chores, study buddies, all of that, but you also need to schedule off-task breaks for them to have that opportunity to socialize with their peers. Those breaks become a form of reward. of self-reward. If they focus on the task until break time, they can reward themselves with some downtime just to be together with their friends. And so with that, I will end. I went 5 minutes over. I apologize. Thank you very much. There is my email address. Please feel free to write that down. Reach out to me. I love to talk to folks afterwards. Thank you all.
Thank you so much, Matt. You're amazing as always. I'm not gonna lie, I've been sitting here trying to catch up on grading for this, and I have read 4 different responses that were submitted a while ago where they cited you and some of the other things. I had them listen to your neurodiversity podcast interview with
Oh,
Emily.
with Emily?
Yeah. And it's just kind of funny. So I've commented on a couple of people. Yeah, we're sitting here listening to talking to Matt while you're citing Matt in your work. I love it. So, and yeah, thank you so much. I always learn so much when you come in here and chat with us and bring all these different perspectives in. And I really appreciate, when we talked about the whole culturally responsive teaching piece, showing that how like TUI is its own culture, like when we think of all these different aspects of culture, there is a separate world for that. And that's something I really think I need to incorporate into some of the stuff I'm doing right now, because I keep trying to explain to people why things like cohorting twice exceptional students are so important. And I'm not getting it across to people. And I'm thinking maybe if I frame it as this cultural piece, this identity piece, maybe I'm not going to get what I want, but at least I feel like I did something.
Well, it's important. And if you get through to one person, that's a win.
Absolutely. So real quick, for the final project, I really think the number one thing I want to reiterate is the real purpose of it is for you guys to show and incorporate what it is that you've learned into something that is meaningful to your actual work. I am not I didn't give you guys a rubric for this. When we go through and read the whatever you do for your final or watch, I also love, this is the first time people have actually done a speech for an elevator speech assignment. I love it. Thank you. Whatever it is that you guys produce, really, we're listening that you are using language and vocabulary we've talked about. We're listening to see, kind of insights that you have. That's what it's all about. Like we're not going to beat you over the head with really nitty-gritty specifics. For the people who asked the question about the reflection on the lesson plan, the reason I requested the reflection has to go back to what Claire talked to us about, which is the book that Matt was talking about earlier. So Claire has asked that specifically from MCPS if we can get some of our teachers who teach twice exceptional kids on a regular basis to develop a lesson plan or rewrite one of their own lesson plans into that Trellis and Bloom model, and then do a reflection on the what, the why. If it's a lesson you've taught before and you're really reflecting on it, bringing those pieces together for us, because that's what we're trying to do in that section of the book, is show the practicality of using that lesson plan style in your general education setting, or in a setting where you're working with twice exceptional students on a regular basis. If that feels really overwhelming to you, don't stress it. Comment on why you made the decisions that you made, but the longer reflection piece had to do with what it was that Claire was asking for. And one thing that I'm doing for her is I'm downloading all of the responses, and she and I are hopefully going to go through them. So if you don't do a reflection and we find what you put in there and we really like it, we might come back and ask you to do a reflection. So FYI, that's all I have for that piece, really. For the people who asked the questions about the profiles we provided, that's only because sometimes you guys don't have, you guys are in the summertime, you don't have any kids right now. And sometimes it's just really hard to think of a student. And if you don't know if you've taught one before, that's really just handing you something to work from. But if you don't want to use those profiles, don't use those profiles. At the end of the day, something that's meaningful to you and to your work that shows what you kind of have absorbed from this class is what we want to see. Do you have any other questions about that? I think if you weren't here before, the Padlet thing, I know it shows that you guys haven't submitted the assignment. We know you have, we know about that issue, and we'll put it in the grades for it. So don't worry that that's showing up in the grade book as not submitted. We're aware of the issue and I don't know how to fix it, so just accept it. Yeah, I don't know if anybody has any other questions for us right now.
Just a clarifying question, I guess, because I'm an overthinker. So we should have completed 6 discussion questions, 3 assignments, and then the final
That sounds kind of accurate.
project, right?
Let's see, I have what is twice exceptional, which was a discussion board, the misdiagnosis and misdiagnosis discussion board, the elevator speech, something that says reflection. I don't remember what that was because we renamed it from what I usually call it. We have the equity assignment, the EML Padlet, and the SEL summarizer, and the
Mhm.
triple identity theory discussion board.
Yeah.
Oh,
Okay. And then the final.
and then the final.
Project. Okay, cool. Just want to make sure.
And if you're one of those people who likes to calculate things, you need 80% to pass the class. So if you need to cut some things, basically you either did it or you didn't do it. That's my grading system. And so if something needs to die, the final project should not be the thing to die. But if you need to skip a discussion board here and there because it's just not going to happen to you, go for it.
I have a
Thank you.
question.
Yeah.
The equity assignment and the Padlet are the same, aren't they?
Yes. Oh, wait, that's why. Okay. Oh, see, I hate Canvas some days. It shows up as 2 different assignments, but it's the same assignment.
Okay.
That's so weird.
Thank you for clarifying that, Kathy. I had the same question.
Sure, sure.
Hannah,
Well,
what
Sarah,
happened?
I'm going to jump off here. This was such an amazing class. Thank you. Is there like a feedback that we can do? You know what I mean for this?
I mean, officially, yes. Did I ever write it or send it to people? No, but you know,
Oh,
collect feedback. And generally, I say you're always welcome to send that either to like my supervisor or directly to me or whatever. And Kathy, check your email because you got something from me this morning.
I saw one at 3. I didn't know this. I saw it 3. Yeah, it was 2 of my assignments been graded.
No. You got something from me directly about the August 6th thing. So check your email.
Oh, I did. Oh, okay. Oh, do I need to
Email
reply
me
to?
if you have questions separately.
Okay, I will. All right, thank you.
Stop our recording. And